Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening if you're in the UK or some other part of the world. It's Patrick Milliken from the Poison Pen Bookstore with Barbara Peters at home. And we are really pleased. We were just commenting on, we couldn't believe it was an entire year since we last spoke with Lynn, but we're delighted to have Lynn Truss back with us to talk about her new book, Psycho by the Sea, which is such an inspired title. I love the title. And Lynn has signed some book plates for us, and so we received them here. I'll go ahead and put a link in the comments field if you'd like to order a copy. And I'll also be watching that comments and chat field, depending upon whether you're on YouTube or Facebook. So if you have questions for Lynn, just go ahead and type them in, and Barbara will summon me towards the end of the hour, and we'll take it from there. So Barbara, over to you.
Thank you very much. I love the title, and I have to tell you, I think that the bunnies are inspired. So we will get to rabbits. Actually, we will get to rabbits as we talk. But let me say that Lynn, you may have first met Lynn in her role as punctuation expert. Eats, shoots, and leaves, and you can work out the punctuation yourself. But it's really true that over the course of history, commas and such have made a difference, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, it was when I wrote that book, that's what I was interested in. I wasn't really interested in the rules and stuff. I was interested in the influence of punctuation, and then I just brought the rules in just to make it complete. And then, of course, a lot of people bought it for the rules. But yeah, I was very interested in the way that people fought over commas, and if a comma was missing from a legal document, it completely changed the meaning. And many legal cases, in fact, have been built on interpreting the things without punctuation.
Absolutely. I'm trying to remember the name of the famous 1916. Was it the Zimmerman telegram?
Roger Casement. Oh, there was that. Yeah, there was that famous. And there was Roger Casement, who was seen as a traitor and tried under the an act of 1350 or something, the Treason Act, and he was so supposedly hanged on a comma because he was executed, according to one interpretation of the law, the act. If it was about whether or not you should be accused of treason if you acted outside the country. And there was a sort of phrase about outside the country, and if it had commas around it, it might have been very clear, but it didn't have commas around it, so it wasn't.
I love that. Well, I think it was the Zimmerman telegram. I might have it wrong, but anyway, something that happened in 1916 that was thought to perhaps be trying to either push or quell, I can't remember which, the United States into World War I. Yeah, there was a comma missing. So anyway, it's all fascinating, but not really the stuff of humor. And so I find it so interesting that Lynn, whom we all knew from Eat, Shoots, and Leaves, has developed into this marvelous humorous mystery writer. And I want to say that that's a hard thing to do. It's really difficult to sustain humor in a series, because inevitably you wind up a sort of character, either because Patrick is helping me, the Zimmerman telegram or Zimmerman cable. Thank you, Patrick. I love the fact that the spectral box appears on Zoom whenever I forget anything, because Patrick has his phone and he's able to help me out. But anyway, it seems to me that humor very often turns into a caricature of itself, or becomes so exaggerated or occasionally so flat that the reader loses interest. So I always open a humorous mystery in a series with some apprehension. But I'm really happy to say that Lynn has not only made it continuously funny and sweet and all the rest, but upped her game here, which is we're going to talk about rabbits. But I would like to say also that the Constable Twitton series, of which this is the fourth, has so far won the Last Laugh Award at Crime Fest and was longlisted for the CWA Daggers. Now, the Last Laugh Award's a really interesting award, and I've known people who won it over the years. Do you want to tell us what it is?
Well, I was new to this genre completely, and I actually didn't know. This is a terrible story. I didn't know I was shortlisted for that award until just before I won it. So I didn't have time to get excited about it. But it's wonderful because it does recognise humorous crime fiction. And so some lovely people, Simon Brett, obviously, who's wonderful. Mick Herron has won it. I know that. No, it's got a very good record, I think, for picking funny writers. And I've read several that have been on the shortlists and so on, and it is good at picking out, who's doing a good job. So no, it's lovely that there is an award for that, because yeah, I mean, my books are set in the past, so they sort of qualify for the historical dagger, which I was longlisted for. And I just hope that this one gets, goes one better at least. I hope so in the historical one, because it's obviously it's up against things set in the 16th century and so on, and Roman times and that kind of thing. And setting it in the 50s doesn't perhaps look like it qualifies, but it certainly requires a lot of research and imagination, of putting yourself back in that time and trying to get all the details right, and trying to get the great thing about setting something in the past is that you can play with attitudes, so obviously in the 50s it would have been a much more sexist society than it is, but you can play with the fact that, say, the main master criminal is a char lady working at a tea lady who works at the police station. She's in perfect cover because she is A, a woman, and B, working class, and so no one pays any attention to her, and she's sitting there sort of finding out all the information about what's going on in the town. She's in fantastic position to run her criminal empire from in there, and no one can possibly pick her out because because of their attitudes being so old-fashioned. So it's just really, it's great device really to set something in the past if you can see the funny side.
Well, you forgot to mention she's also an aging woman.
That's true. Yes.
Invisible like glass in their mid-40s and 50s. So, although I think that's changed too, but a lot of it depends on the woman. I have to say, Lynn, that I find it unnerving that the 1950s has become historical as a person born in 1940. One of the I don't know what you want to call it, of living a long life, is that your life really does turn into history. And the things that mattered a lot when you were young, in my case, let's say the Vietnam War, was my first husband was trained to be a Green Beret in Vietnam, has now become, a history book war. And, we moved way on since. And, it's a privilege to grow old. It really is. But at the same time, it's fascinating to see that.
It's confusing too.
No, it's
confusing too. Someone pointed out recently, and it's so obvious when you think about it, that Sgt. Pepper, the Beatles album, released in 1967, was now, if one looked back, it was actually closer in time to the end of the First World War than it is to now. And I found that absolutely shocking. Because to me, nothing was nearer to the First World War, and then when you think, well, that was only 50 years, 49 years, and now we've had more than 50 years since then. So that, as you get older, those things really strike you, and it makes history shrink. I mean, it makes you think, well, if I can remember back 50 years, then, 100 years is nothing, and 150 years is nothing, and 200 years is nothing. And I just love that. I find that a great perspective to gain as you get older.
Well, here's the thought. I'm writing a piece about Agatha Christie for upcoming academic work or whatever, and I had a fascinating talk with a local playwright who's written a play called The Mysterious Disappearance about Christie, and it'll be running on our homepage. So I really recommend you watch it. It's fascinating, and we'll probably put it up Friday to run over the weekend. But what I realized as I was looking back into this thing is that Agatha Christie wrote Murder at the Vicarage, in which she introduced Miss Marple in her first full-length appearance, although she'd been in a few short stories before 1930. Anyway, it was published in 1930. And today, it's historical fiction. When Christie published it, it was a contemporary English village mystery. Now it's an historical English cozy. And written in 1930, we're almost a century up on it. It was actually closer in time to the work of Anthony Trollope, for example, than it is to, Lynn Truss, for example. How amazing is that? And, I think it says a lot for Christie's plots that were very much puzzle oriented. She was a person who had a natural mathematical ability and loved puzzles, that has kept them fascinating to people, even though, they've become real period pieces in terms of their attitudes. And there's a lot you can criticize about Raymond Chandler or Christie or any people who wrote a century ago. I really dislike looking back at history through the lens of today and, taking a position that people had incorrect views and so forth. You have to accept the fact that this was how it was at the time. And you're right about your char lady, that she would have been. Char lady is basically British for, how would you want to describe it in American terms? She was like the cleaner and made the tea.
Made the tea.
Sort of like the office help, whatever you want to call it. But what does char stand for? Does it stand for tea?
Yeah, I think so. Chai, char. I think it's from India, the sort of Raj thing, that sort of using chai is for tea or something. Char, cup of char became cup of tea. I think it's from returning soldiers from India or something. I don't think it's used much now, to be honest, in Britain. I think most people have to have a translation.
Right, well, that's why I wanted to bring it up. I know you referred to her as the char lady, and I want people thinking she was like at a barbecue or something. Quite a fact. It was, it was, she's older, she's female, and she has what looks like a very low level job. And so, as you point out, she's nearly invisible. And much of the comedy in this arises from the fact that, as you say, she's running her criminal empire inside the Brighton police station. But one of the other reasons that she gets away with that, and I thought you did a particularly good job in this, is the Inspector Stain. He's an idiot. How did you decide to, because you make such fun of him as a investigator and a policeman, how did you decide to come up with Inspector Stain?
Well, he just is an idiot. I love the idea of inverting the hierarchy. So the person at the bottom is the clever one, the person at the top is the stupid one, and in between you have Constable Twitten, who is the sort of nominal star of these books. He's the clever young one who has come to the station, as we know through the 4 books. He's been there 4 months, and he's the person who looks around him and sees more, and also knows more about. He's just a thinker. He's quite a good thinker. He reads a lot. So in this book, he's just read The Hidden Persuaders, which came out in 1957, about advertising and how advertisers do this unscrupulous stuff about motivation research and how they understand why people do things, how to get people to buy things. And he's fascinated and shocked and horrified. And as people were, initially, they didn't know, it wasn't common sense to them. It was actually shocking. And so he sees how it applies to the case. So he's busy trying to apply it to the case, which is what his brain box instincts are. And then the person above him is a bit dim, Sergeant Brunswick. He's sort of plodding and wants to find things out, but he's not capable of it. And then above him, of course, is someone who gets all the glory all the time, Inspector Steen. And Inspector Steen is just, very self-absorbed. He's very vain, but he's famous because he's got a spot on the radio. He knows a lot about the law, but he doesn't really like dealing with criminals. And he'd rather not think about them. That's his sort of attitude. And he wishes you didn't have to give them so much attention, because giving them attention only encourages them. So he's got completely the right attitude as a policeman. I have a passage in this book where, he's come back from London. He shot somebody in Murder by Milk Bottle. He shot a famous villain, and now he's got enormous fame and enormous credentials as a policeman because he did this. He didn't even know who he was shooting at the time, but he did it. He's now got awards, and he comes back and he wants to tell them all about what he did in London and how he's feted everywhere and had marvelous time. And but they say, well, we've actually got a murder. There's a murder in a shop here. We have to go and investigate it. And he's thoroughly annoyed. This is what he hates. This is what he hates. You've got a nice day planned, and then some criminal does something like that, and suddenly everything's up in the air. Everyone has to respond to that. Everyone has to run off and solve the crime, so his sort of attitudes are completely sort of ego and vain, and actually I find him very, very enjoyable to write. I really like writing him because I quite sort of enjoy inhabiting him as much as I enjoy the others. I mean, I think what you were saying earlier about caricature is that it's really struck me, because these characters I wrote originally as radio characters, and they were broad. They were very broad. It was a sort of caricature. It had that sort of goon show or whatever, it had that sort of surreal quality. And then putting them in books meant making them real, trying to make them real, try and get inside them and, give them an inner life. And I think that's got better with each book. I sort of think with this one, I've understood all of them pretty well. And I really feel that, I know a lot more about Mrs. Groynes, the mastermind. I actually know much more now about how, I have a chapter about how she came to Brighton, what she did, how she set up her gang, how she got rid of the opposition, who she likes, who she actually cares about in her gang. And, that sort of thing is just a joy to keep exploring them, but keep the relationships the same, that Twitten knows who she is. He knows what she's doing, but he can't prove it. He can't do anything about it. He can't expose her. So he's always caught in that tension. And then when it comes to solving crimes, he's got all this kind of energy, intellectual energy going, but she's the one who always helps him. She's the one who says, well, look at the motive, dear. Look at the way this person was murdered. So-and-so wouldn't do that, would they? You wouldn't help someone with a milk bottle. You wouldn't. So she's always the one who puts him on the right lines, just because she's a criminal. She actually has, she's got experience and she's got common sense. So they sort of solve, she unacknowledged, but they do it together. So it's the sort of, he can't do it on his own, because he hasn't got he's not a wicked person. He can't think like a wicked person. He can always see he's looking for the patterns. He's looking for applying things he's read, but he can't, he doesn't actually solve anything on his own.
Well, he's the opposite of what you would call in British slang a plod.
Yes.
The sense that it's true, that he reads a lot, he's more thoughtful, but because the police system, and you can really see that today if you watch Line of Duty, is really run along military lines. And so a junior officer really doesn't have any particularly good way to go outside the boundaries of his job. And if he's senior officer, an Inspector Stain really embodies the Peter principle, if you think of it. He's risen to the level of his own incompetence, and in fact, slightly beyond it, because of his heroic deed in the book before. So Twitten is, compelled to try to do his work under the radar, so to speak, of Steen, who doesn't want to bother with it at all. And it's a really tricky place for him to be, and then he knows the char lady who's helping him is the criminal head, the gang boss. He knows his inspector's basically incompetent and uninterested, even more so. And there he is, in a place where he has very little actual power, but nonetheless, if he doesn't do the job, it isn't going to get done, right? Yeah,
which is good, isn't it? I mean, it's a lovely position that he's in. It's sort of it has lots of potential all the time. I mean, one of the things that I decided early on was that they would only progress, each book is a month after the last. And that is because I think he is 22, and if I were to put them a year between or something, he would start, you couldn't believe it, that someone would put up with that position. He would leave, or he would get bitter, or he would start drinking or something, you couldn't keep that level of his energy and eagerness and still his respect for the people he works for. He doesn't actually despise Inspector Steen. He always does, respect him and call him sir and everything. Just kind of dodges around him to get things done. And you could only do that if you're young, if you're really young and new, that he would be able to put up with it.
Wow, I definitely agree with that. And the great thing about historical fiction is that you don't have to age anybody in real time. They're already aged. So, you can, well, it's true. You can go
Yeah.
day to day or month. I remember when Lindsay Davis wrote The Silver Pigs and then the sequel, which I think was Bronze something.
Mhm.
The Bronze book started within minutes, if I remember, after
Right.
the Silver Pigs ended. And I thought, isn't that great? I mean, we're in ancient Rome.
Mm.
So
Mm.
if we just
Yeah.
move rapidly from one thing to another, you could write 20 books inside of a
Mhm.
year if you really
Mhm.
wanted to, without disturbing the historical context. And that's
Mhm.
that's actually a good thing, because things metamorphose, society changes, attitudes change and all. And if you were pushing ahead too far, you would run out of the zone
Mm.
that you established.
Mm.
And there you'd be. I also, really was thinking about your remark about advertising and manipulation. Imagine what those people would have felt if they'd known about cookies, if they had known about, the way that
Yeah.
if you shop
Algorithms.
for something on the internet, the next 18 things you open all have images of, whether it was shoes or whether it was a sofa
Mm.
or whatever it is. That we are manipulated every single day in unimaginable ways. But that was a tremendous shock in the 1950s to think that
Mm.
consumer behavior could in fact be manipulated
Mm.
by advertising and other forces. Whereas today we know for a fact that
Mm.
that's true. And what I find even more distressing is that we voluntarily accept it.
Mm.
You
Yeah.
know, allow cookies or decline flashes up,
Mhm.
when you
Yeah.
go to some new
You have
website
to
or
allow them all
something.
the time. You have to
Yeah,
allow
and
them.
I mostly
Yeah.
click decline all the time, but
Mhm.
sometimes it's involuntary. I mean, I don't
Mhm.
remember. I shopped for something not long ago, was looking for it, and then like the next time I opened the Washington Post or
Mhm.
Publishers Weekly or something, there it was.
Mm. I know.
The whole deal. Instagram
Which
is
is,
rife with that. If you look
oh,
on
really?
or want to shop for something on Instagram, the next 48 photos you're going to get are all going to be for products similar to the one that
Oh,
you shop
really?
for.
I don't use Instagram. That's very interesting. I mean, at first I thought it was coincidence. I started thinking,
No,
how extraordinary.
no.
I mean, it does two things. Supposedly it must influence some people to buy more, but it also just warps your idea of of what's of any objective reality, because it's being tailored to you. And that's very dangerous. I mean, it's all very dangerous, I think, mostly social media and stuff, because they're all making people be much more self-important than they should be. But it
Absolutely.
really still plays into that we all feel we're the center of the universe, because the internet is reflecting back to us
Just
only the
think
things
about
we're
the
already
concept.
interested in.
Yeah, think about the concept of a selfie. I ran across the
Mm,
line in something I read the other day where somebody was taking a selfie and the other person said, well, why would you do that? Why would you
mm,
why would you photograph yourself? Why wouldn't you be photographing, the
mm,
landscape or the artwork or whatever? But I mean, it seemed unimaginable to whatever character this was that anybody would want to take a picture of themselves and then do something with
mm,
it. What we have learned at the Poison Pen with live signing lines and all, everybody wants to be the hero of their own story. And because of social media, everybody has a platform on which they can publish their individual story. And so,
yeah.
there they are. I want to take a picture of me with author X, because then I can go home
Mm,
and, it's part of my story. And think about how sad people who didn't have that opportunity will feel when they see that I was there. And,
mm,
it just
mhm,
goes on and on and on. And
mm,
it's really changed the nature of interactions um,
mhm,
a great deal, and lengthened them,
mm,
because now you have to allow for all that time. You used to be able to do an author event and have a signing line in a relatively reasonable timeline that wasn't too exhausting for the author, not to mention the book selling staff. And now it can take forever because you have
mm.
100 people in line and each person has a camera. And all
I
of them
was,
want to be photographed with the author. So,
yeah.
I understand the urge to make memories. That's why people scrapbook.
Mm,
That's why people write diaries and keep journals and the whole bit. I totally get it. But those things were private. They were not,
yeah.
you
I
didn't,
know.
write in your diary and then publish it.
Mhm.
But now
No.
now everything is published on a platform where anyone in the world can see it, unless you're maybe got, a friends group on Facebook or something where you can lock out people. But I think it's changed the whole dynamic of how people interact. But here we are, back in 1957 with Constable Turpin, right? So one of the things I really love about this book is because there's a gang involved, and Brighton is not London, but nonetheless, a gang can in fact work the city and control things, as there needs to be a lookout. And I wish you would tell us about the lookout, because I just think the whole thing with this kid and the rabbits is fabulous.
Oh, thank you. Well, yes, he goes missing at the beginning, and he's known as Barrow Boy Cecil. I must tell you, well, I'll tell you where I got it from. There's a wonderful film from the 50s called The Long Arm, and it is beloved, I think, of people who love old classic crime stuff. And The Long Arm is this marvelous film. Actually, it's about criminal records. It's actually about how some safes are opened by all across the country. There seems to be nothing they have in common, and the use of criminal records at Scotland Yard is the way that finally someone is identified. And in the middle of all this, a young sergeant goes out at lunchtime to talk to his grass, his informer, his street life informer. And the man he goes up to has got a tray with bunnies on it, with these actually they're enormous. When I saw it again, I couldn't believe they were about this big. They're made of about that big. They're made of sort of Bakelite or something, some horrible, and probably you did something with with compressed air to make them go along. But his man is staying there saying, "See the bunny run, see the bunny jump, see the bunny run, see the bunny jump, only £1. And he stops out, he talks out the side of his mouth, and he talks to the policeman. And so he was the very direct inspiration for Barrow Boy Cecil, who has got a tray of wind-up little bunnies. And he stands at a very central point in Brighton, which is the clock tower, which has a view down to the sea, a view back to the station, view down two big shopping streets. And it's absolutely a focal point. And he stands there all day, every day, saying, "See the bunny run, see the bunny jump, only £1." And he does sell some. And he is Mrs. Grimes' lookout man. And he is he's basically the Bush Telegraph. People can bring him information, he passes it on to everyone else. And he goes missing at the beginning of the story. And it becomes clear that Mrs. Grimes acquired him when she came to Brighton. He had been the lookout man for another gang, which she wiped out. She had this famous shootout organised, which killed loads and loads of Brighton villains, including his boss. And but she acquired Cecil after that, and she really liked him, and so she's kept him on all this time, and that's been his job. So yeah, he's the bunny's man. And after he disappears, a crushed up bunny is sent as a warning that that he's been not a real bunny, but a crushed up plastic bunny is delivered to Mrs. Grimes with a finger, so to give her the impression, at least, that something horrible has happened to Barrow Boy Cecil. So that's it. Barrow Boy is a sort of term for a market trader, a sort of street trader. And my dad used to be a Barrow Boy at one time. So I like the idea of having a Barrow Boy.
Right. Well, I mean, it's somebody, carrying merchandise around. Basically, it's like a food cart, except that it's merchandise or something very similar. So they used to funnel them around in barrows, hence the name Barrow Boy. But anyway, so he's missing. And then let's see, we have we're at Gosling's department store, and an American researcher has been found dead in the music department. What's that about?
Yeah. Well, I actually, what I do for each book is I read the local paper for 1957. I read another month of the paper, and some stories sort of stand out, and I think that would be good. I'll use that. And there was, in fact, a researcher who was working on crowd behaviour, and someone from the local paper went out with him in Brighton. They went to the races, actually. They went to the Brighton races. And it's an unusual feature because most of the newspaper has not got this sort of reporting at all. But there was just this one half-page story about them going to the races, and it was ghastly. It went really wrong. I mean, this man was sort of jostled. He felt really unsafe amongst this crowd, this horrible crowd at the races. And I think he just had a hateful time and didn't learn anything because he was just so scared. So it was obviously a terrible experience, and it's a bad experiment. But I thought that because it connects so well with this motivation research and so on. So I had him working on that he's sort of working on motivation research himself. Which is the current sort of trend in sociology, and he is looking at how people behave in shops and how they respond to, you know, heaps of different sorts of washing powder and different colours they see and all that sort of thing. And yeah, so he is found in the record department in one of those listening booths. Yeah, so he's the murder. That gets it all started.
And then we have
there are many strands. You know, that's the whole point. Is you sort of start with lots of strands, and then they all make sense in the end because they're all part of the same plot.
Well, I mean, it's certainly true. And a policeman would never be working just one single case. You know,
well, that's true
I
too.
mean, do that with a private eye because, you know, they'd be hired by a client and the idea would be they'd pursue whatever the client was paying them for. But police have to deal with crime every day. And so you might have one guy working several different cases. Tell me about, or tell us about the escapee from the local prison, because he's actually maybe the most villainous person in this.
Well, he's absolutely terrifying. He is the psycho of the title, which, you know, I mean, I feel it's okay to use that title because of Psycho itself being around this time, but he is, he's in a sort of really high security prison for people with psychiatric problems, and because he has committed some really horrible crimes against policemen, and he has in fact cut their heads off. And so he has, and he receives visits from someone who apparently is just concerned academically with helping him, but who is eventually involved in his escape for the purposes of taking him to Brighton to cut off a particular policeman's head. So he is the threat. He's the threat really all the way through it. And we don't get much of his internal life, but we get enough, I think, to be pretty scared and to be, he's aware that he's being manipulated, but at the same time, there are certain triggers that have been established that will drive him over the edge. And most of the book is about those triggers. I don't want to give too much away.
No, you can't. Is he based on anything real, or is he a whole figment of your imagination?
He's I think, complete figment of my imagination.
I'm relieved.
I think so. Yeah. I don't think there was anyone. It's just the sort of, you know, when Steen comes back to Brighton, there's a very nice scene, I think, when they fill him in on everything that's happened so far and while he's been away. And so there's someone who's been attacked somewhere. There's, you know, this sort of thing. There's a man who's been found dead in the department store. There's, there's someone who is coming for you and who is a known psychopath who cuts people's heads off. Oh, and Mrs. Groins has left. And, you know, Mrs. Groins has left. You know, so he only focuses on that, and he doesn't quite focus on the thing that he should have really picked up, which was that someone's after him. So he's yeah, it's quite funny. I think that he's takes him a while to sink in, you know, for it to sink in that he is in extreme danger from this thing. Yeah.
Right. So the reader is going, well, I don't know. I mean, have you got much feedback from readers about whether they would like to see the inspector go or stay?
No, we haven't had a vote or anything. I know he's not. I think I have a lot of sympathy for him. You see, I know that he is irritating, but I sort of, as I say, I understand where he's coming from to a certain extent, and I think he's sort of, I mean, everyone sees, as you said, everyone's the hero of their own story, and he's sort of he's got his own sort of set of values, really, and he, as I say, he doesn't really like criminals, and he sort of, his authority is terribly important to him, and so on. I remember thinking at one point, and I don't know whether this is relevant really or true, but that they're like, the three policemen are like segments of a person. So, Inspector Steen is the ego. He's just ego. He's like a baby. He's like a baby. He just wants. He's he sees everything in terms of himself. He's just and then the sergeant is the id. He's a kind of all emotion. He nothing else. He can't think rationally a lot of the time because he's affected by his own emotions. And then Twitten is the sort of super ego, who is just only seeing it from top down, but isn't in touch with his emotions, isn't in touch with his ego. And I just think that kind of works. I think that's why it sort of works, is that they are, these different aspects of a personality.
Well, you've got three legs of a triangle. It would be disturbing if you lost one of them, because
yeah, exactly.
wouldn't be a triangle anymore. So I think one reason that the humor works so well in these books, Lynn, is that it's really situational. You're not making the characters behave ridiculously, but you put them into situations where the humor arises. And let's take the Barrel Boy, for example. He's not a funny person. I mean, he's the lookout for a gang, he's not but the idea of him standing out there day and night in the rain, or in whether or not with a tray full of wind up bunnies, collecting information, that's where the humor comes in, really, is that situation that you put him in. So do you have, a visual imagination? Do you actually see that sort of a scene?
I think I do. I think I must have. I mean, I've definitely got an oral imagination. I hear them very clearly. And I wrote for radio for a long time as well, and I really do hear their voices. I hear their, they do speak differently from each other, and I think that's terribly important. And I find it sometimes when I'm reading other people, I do think, oh, if they'd only made someone slightly more distinct, in the way they speak, I'd get on better with this. But for me, it's so important that the four of them, the four main characters, you could read a line from any of them and you'd know who it was, because of the vocabulary, because of the structure, because of the sort of rhythms and and the content, obviously. So I think that's quite important. But I also do, I do visualize. I do visualize the sort of mainly sort of people being, especially Twitten being sort of caught between two things, that sort of double take almost, that he's always in that situation. I mean, I have two or three scenes in this where he's in bed at his digs. He's up, he's now sleeping, he's now got a room in a house, and he's gone to bed, and Mrs. Croydon suddenly appears in his room and talks to him in the dark. So it's in the dark, he can't see her, he's terrified, he's absolutely terrified, because she's quite dangerous. But so it's all this that sort of position he's in, being sort of vulnerable in bed while she's sort of interrogating him. I just think that's funny. I mean, I love that idea of the sort of, oh God, what's she going to do? Because he's kind of sweet. I think he's very sweet, and that sort of scene, I suppose, is quite visual, isn't it? I mean, it is a kind of, it's very physical and physically real, I think.
It's always struck me when I read your books that you must actually see, what it is that you're writing about. It's a lot different than other kinds of narrative style. So, if you see it, then you can make us see it. And, we can put ourselves in that place. Lynn, as you said, you wrote a lot for radio and so forth. did you set out to write a mystery with your first book in the Constable Twitten series, or did it just turn out to be a mystery?
No, I really wanted to. I'd done before these two, these four rather. I did two. I was asked actually to contribute to a series, which was rather an interesting thing. In the UK, we have this Hammer horror. I don't know if you've ever. Do you know of Hammer horror? It was sort of 50s, 60s, 70s, I suppose. Sort of cheaply made horror films that have quite got a huge cult following here, and quite a lot of famous horror films were made by the Hammer Studio. And for some reason, the Hammer brand wanted to commission various writers who've never written that kind of thing, sort of literary writers, to write novellas with a sort of horror theme. And I was asked if I'd like to do one, and I said, as long as it can be funny, that would be nice. So I did one called Cat Out of Hell, which was sort of quite scary. Actually, that scared me, but it was about a sort of modern person who finds himself caught up in this sort of a sort of interview with a vampire kind of thing about talking cats. So cats, it's so complicated, but I won't go into it. But anyway, it was talking cats, evil talking cats who survive centuries, and who are and there was a mystery in that about who killed so and so, and I really enjoyed drawing everything together and getting to the conclusion. The book is quite short. It's about, I think, about 40,000 words, something like that. So short, much shorter than me. And I followed that up with another one, which was called The Lunar Cats. And that was a sort of taking one of the cats back to his origin story in the 18th century, on the voyage of Captain Cook, first voyage to the South Seas. He started out as a scientifically minded, clever cat who ended up bitter and evil because of his experiences at sea. So, and again, there was, a real mystery at the heart of that as well. So I felt sort of I'd got that kind of some experience by that point of weaving these different things together. So no, I definitely did want to. So, and I like comic. I mean, it's very interesting that there is comic crime fiction. There's a lot of it, actually. There's a lot out there. It's kind of seen as quite low status, I reckon, comic crime in the publishing world. But in television and so on, I mean, comic crime is about half of the crime. I mean, I see there are many funny cop shows. There are very, funny detective things. It's quite normal that there should be some wit and there should be some, some funny situations, and that you like a character because he makes you laugh. And it just seems odd that you always have to sort of almost feel a bit embarrassed that you write about comic crime for publication. But I love it. I mean, I think of the two things. They're the two things I want to do. I want to set a mystery. I want to set a puzzle, and make people laugh as well. So to me, it just seems obvious that why would you leave one of them out? Why would you leave out the comedy when you can do, what's like having, it's just like double whammy. It's great.
I think part of the problem is something I referred to earlier, which is that comedic series often don't last very long. And so,
really?
So publishers, I think, with a track record of many of those kinds of series wearing out their welcome, becoming, and so they don't probably put the weight into it, and they may be harder to market. I mean, it's one thing to create Jack Reacher, an eponymous postmodern Western hero, and it's another thing to have Constable Twitten. And I love the fact that you write them, and I enjoy them. I have over the years enjoyed some, and then eventually grown tired of them. I think there were writers like the late Robert Bernard, or Bernard, whichever way you want to call it, who had a gift for writing comedy, but he often wrote standalones. You know, it wasn't a series. He was a wonderful writer and an ingenious plotter. He wrote a book called A Scandal in Belgravia that remains one of my very favorite mysteries, and it has a really wicked twist at the end. But he was naturally humorous. You know, I mean, I knew him as a person, and he was that kind. He was a school teacher, so maybe he had to develop humor to survive. I don't know. But anyway, you know, so sometimes people can write comic sorts of novels, but they aren't necessarily a series. Did you ever read Sarah Caldwell's marvelous books? She won. Well, if you have not read, I'll have to, you know, I'm going to, Patrick, help. What are the name of the Sarah Caldwell books? Type them in for me. She won the Anthony Award, which is a very big award for.
Let's see. Thus Was Adonis Murdered.
Right.
Shortest Way to Hades. Crikey, I can't remember the others, but I'll look them up.
Well, it's the third one that won her. Anyway, they're really funny in a very British way, a little bit like Edmund Crispin, if you ever read his.
Oh, I love Edmund Crispin.
Well, she was in that kind of Oxford, you know, she was a barrister. And her brother's Alexander Cockburn, was Alexander Cockburn, you know, was a really famous journalist. So she was very much on the intellectual, you know, word game kind of thing, and she had a barrister named Hilary who was the protagonist of these just fabulous books, and you never knew whether Hilary was male or female. It's one of those wonderful names.
That's good. Yeah.
And so that was part of the humor too, is that you just had no idea, you know, whether but they were never going to win a huge audience, you know. I mean, they were almost self. Thus Was Adonis Murdered, right, is the first one. But she took advantage of the tax laws on the Channel Islands and the Isle of Sark, which has its own, you know, peculiar state and so forth. Yeah. And she wrote a really brilliant mystery having to do, because Hilary was a barrister in Chambers that I think had to do with tax and all. That was absolutely fabulous.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
But unfortunately, she was so paralyzed, I think, by winning the Anthony Award and all, and it was going to be a really hard series to sustain, and so she stopped.
Oh,
you know, she stopped.
Yeah.
And now those works are hardly known today, and yet they were sensational at the time that she wrote them.
Yeah. I must say, when you mentioned Edmund Crispin, I mean, I read them many years ago, and I think probably they were lurking, you know, always as a sort of model. I really love those. And
please, Sheriff is one of my favorite literary characters, and the novel in which he is supposed to run for office, and The Non-Doing Pig. I mean, I think his rejection, he actually wins, and then he rejects the whole thing. His rejection rather than his acceptance speech and The Non-Doing Pig are, you know, are complete classics. Most people like the movie Toy Shop, but that's not my favorite Crispin at all. It's really the one with The Non-Doing Pig. You know, Peter Lovesey is a very funny writer. Peter Lovesey has.
I was going to say the Sergeant Crib. You see, they did Sergeant Crib on TV when I was in the early 80s or late 70s or something, and I just loved them so much. And I've just got them to watch again. I bought them recently to see again. And obviously, they'll look very old-fashioned. But I mean, the tone of the Peter Lovesey's Crib books and the TV, I loved so much, and I think that
he
was
gets a lot of humor into the Peter Diamond ones, largely in Peter relating to his superior officers, whom you know, but also in outside influence. And he's also written a number of standalones, which are really clever and quite funny. You know, so I'm bringing that up because one way, you know, to sustain, I think, a long career writing humor, it might be to write the occasional standalone.
Yeah. Well, maybe
just a thought.
We've a very exciting thing happened a couple of weeks ago, which was that I was elected to the Detection Club, which is this wonderful.
I've been there as a guest on various occasions, and it's
Oh, it was
Fascinating.
wonderful. So I swore on the skull, you know, the Agatha.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, it was wonderful. And but before my initiation, I went to a lunch in the summer, and Peter Lovesey was there. I was very overwhelmed actually. I was very excited to see him. So that was very lovely. Yeah, I was really thrilled. I was really, really thrilled. It was,
He's a lovely man, and just again with a real genius for puzzles. He really can write some. I think he has written some remarkable books over the years. I did an event with him not long ago, and we kind of went back over some of the highlights of the Diamond books and so forth. But I've read everything he's ever written, and and of course I'm old, so I've gotten to read him in real time. Which is, well, it's true, so that makes it fun. So let's call Patrick up, and while he's appearing, let me ask you, are you working on a 5th for Constable Twitten, or what are you doing?
Well, it's funny you were talking about it, because I'm not at the moment, and there was a sort of break, and I would love to be writing a 5th one, but at the moment I'm not. So I'll see whether or not it gets picked up and I can do a 5th one, or whether I'll write something else. I've got an idea. I've got an idea for a standalone, and it's kind of, it's really tickling me as an idea. So I think probably that's what I'm going to do next, and then come back, I hope, to Twitten, because I absolutely love these books, and I feel as though I'd really hit my stride with the 4th one. I really feel it was kind of really motoring.
I agree.
So it's a bit frustrating. It was very frustrating.
I think it's the strongest book. I definitely do.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed reading it very much. One of the advantages of doing these programs is that, we read all the books that we talk about. So here we are. Patrick, do you have questions for Lynn?
Well, I was just going to ask you, was P.G. Wodehouse at all an influence?
Love P.G. Wodehouse. Yeah, I adore P.G. Wodehouse. And that was another honour this year. They made me a patron of the P.G. Wodehouse Society. So I'm very excited about that too. Now, I adore him. I haven't read everything. I mean, who has read everything? I tend to reread the same one somehow. But I love his prose. I think he's one of the great stylists of all time. And that lightness, that sort of, that pleasure in writing, and that sense of that lightness of tone, that enjoyment of writing. He's second to none, isn't he? He's absolutely wonderful.
He's a good natural antidepressant, isn't he?
Yeah, completely.
I think he makes you feel good, when you're in a bad,
Yeah. I have a friend who I used to go on holiday at the same time to a Greek island with her, and she sort of, she has a tendency to get depressed. And when we were there, she was reading Bring Up the Bodies by Hilary Mantel and feeling like, absolutely terrible. And I sort of shoved some P.G. Wodehouse and said, read this instead. And she did. She really cheered up. Yeah, it's absolutely a necessity to read P.G. Wodehouse, I think, to keep your spirits up. I gave a quote once for a book, because they were doing a new edition, and I said, he can always raise your spirits, no matter how high they are already. I thought I was quite pleased with that.
A very nice quote. I love that. He was a great wordsmith too. I mean, he's not only funny, but he really had a command of language.
Totally.
So he was funny, but he was elegantly funny in addition to being,
Well, the thing that's so great, and I think is sort of apropos of what you're doing, is he captures the eccentricities so well. Like the Blandings Castle mysteries, and Lord Elmsworth and the big pig. It's just free-ranging pig around the manor. I mean, they're just so much fun to read.
Yeah.
And speaking of eccentrics, Barbara mentioned Sarah Caldwell. And she came here once, remember, Barbara? Way back when, and she was a classic British eccentric, wasn't she?
She was. I spent more time with her in England than I did, at the store. She didn't travel all that much, but she was a heavy smoker. She actually
did snuff too, didn't she? Because
and she really loved to drink. I mean, you had to be very careful about spending time with Sarah, because she could really drink. And I have almost no tolerance for alcohol, so there I was. It's just but yeah, she had a funny way of speaking. I mean, she was really a classic. You're completely right. A classic kind of British
She seemed like she was
Spencer,
out of
also a
another.
classic kind of British academic. You know, you could just see her in chambers at Oxford, you know, kind of, you know, with her long hair and the cigarettes and the whole bit. Yes. No, she
It was
great.
of an earlier era, you know.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely so. Yeah.
What
One of
about-
the things I always loved about Britain up until maybe the end of the 20th century was the way that it cherishes eccentrics. And, you know, somehow the empire allowed eccentrics to exist no matter what corner they went to. If they couldn't, you know, if they couldn't survive in London, they could always go to, you know, whatever.
That's
some
like
other
the
city.
American South is the same way, you know, they kind of protect their eccentrics.
Yeah.
What about Ruth Dudley Edwards? Would she fit into this discussion at all, or?
She's a killingly funny. I'm really happy to have been her editor for a while. And also I've read all of her books. I think Matricide at St. Martha's is one of the funniest academic histories I have ever read. And I really loved her. I'm going blank as to the name of her primary sleuth. But yeah, no, I think Ruth's books are amazing. She took on, do you know them at all, Lynn?
No,
She took on one British institution after another. She is a satirist. She's actually a great journalist, Irish, and I think writes for The Economist, if I'm remembering right. But she has skewered like the church and the art establishment and the, you know, the Oxford Cambridge establishment and you name it. But the first book, the one that you need to start with, is called Matricide at St. Martha's.
Okay.
Honestly, you really ought to find it, and you can read your way through them. They are hilarious.
Oh, great. No, thanks. Lots of good recommendations coming here. Thank you.
Let's get to the important stuff. Let's talk about that vinyl system I see behind you.
Oh, can you?
Got a nice little desktop vinyl rig here.
Thank you. Yeah, it's moved around the house a few times, but it's now in my study, and yeah, it is quite a good, nice little place to listen in here. Yeah, I have a few records I like vinyl. And this is very solid to put it on, which is good because I had it in the kitchen for a while, and I would walk past and it would jump, you know, because there just was, you know, wasn't too stable. So this is good. Unfortunately, the I don't know if I can show you, but the chair in here is always now occupied by a puppy. So I can't sit on that chair and listen to my records because it's very much where you said I could show.
Yes, absolutely.
Here we go. Come on. She's very sweet. She's very, very sweet.
Oh.
And she's my darling. She's
nice
year old. And she's very, very lovely. Oh, she's
She
very bleary. You can't see her eyes very well. No, she's a Norfolk Terrier actually.
Okay.
And she's a real sweetie pie. She's a sweetie pie. So I don't like to take her chair away from her too much.
You're lucky she stays in the chair. We have 2 new puppies and they wouldn't sit still for 2 seconds.
One thing that's really nice about these virtual events is we get a glimpse, you know, kind of a voyeuristic glimpse into various different writers' workspaces. It looks like you have a really great space there.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've actually got 2 offices. This is the one that was in the house that was built in when I bought the house, and it's got lots of archive and stuff in it now. And I've got a garden. I've got a sort of a garden office as well.
Nice.
And that's now full of, it has all the books. Well, it has a lot of books. And that has my research stuff and so on. So I tend to write there. This is the sort of the admin office. And then I've got the writing, you know, where inspiration strikes and so on is in my, it's a very nice space to be in, the garden office, because it's all very quiet here. It's not as though I'm getting away from noise or bustle. And I live on my own, except for the dog. So, you know, it's not getting away from people either. It just is still removing ourselves from the house and being somewhere else just gives you another layer of concentration somehow, and of being completely sort of involved in what you're writing. So I do find it's very useful. And I think I've written all the Treason books in the garden shed as it is.
Does it give you the idea that I'm going to work? I'm going
It does a
outside
bit.
my home to work. Yeah.
Yeah. And at first I didn't have it linked to the internet, which was a stupid decision, because actually you need to look things up all the time anyway. So of course you need it. You need it to be you need to be connected up. But it's not on the phone, and that's good. That's good. So I can be away from the phone. Yeah, it's just sort of tucked away.
I have a question
That's
that's come in
wonderful.
about someone is saying how much they like the book, the aesthetic, the cover
Oh,
design.
great. Yeah.
Do you
Oh,
have
thank you.
input into that?
Not much, but I'm very pleased that I think you'll have noticed that the American editions sort of changed quite radically after two. The first two were done in a kind of noir style, so shot in the dark. You've got it there. That's the American edition, and that's isn't it? I mean, I love it. It's very humorous. I think it's very kind of, and it's got that sort of noirish look. And the second one, similarly,
Titan rock
was
kind of feel to it.
yeah, it's very good. I mean, it has nothing to do with the book at all. I mean, it's set in the summer and so on. But that one, when we got to Murder by Milk Bottle, that's the British edition, and so there's the same artist who's been doing all the British ones, and they've got this lovely. I think they're very very attractive, and they've got a lovely basic color. And the Psycho by the Sea, I think, is just it's terrific. Yeah, and they've all got on them somewhere this sort of rather larky seagull. He's very small in this one. The seagull sitting on the railings by the sea, but there's always the seagull, and on the because in the UK they're published, the imprint is called Raven, and normally it's an R on the spine with a raven on top.
Right.
But for mine, they've put the seagull instead. So that's been very sweet, actually, that they did that. I think they've done a lovely, fantastic job with the books. I think they're very well produced. Really attractive. They're really attractive.
The blue obviously is there to highlight the fact that Brighton is on the coast, on the south coast, and is famous for being a seaside community, seaside spa. In Regency times is where the Print Regent built his wonderful pavilion, which I have enjoyed touring and so forth. No, I think they do an absolutely great job. Well, let's hope that we will actually have a fifth Constable Twitton, but I'm excited to hear that you're going to do something different and standalone. So I'll look forward to that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and it's lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much, Barbara.
Well, you're entirely welcome. Patrick always has wonderful questions too. Patrick, did I leave anything out? I apologize.
I don't think so. There's these little discussions kind of happen that aren't really questions, but people are discussing whether it's really necessary to start with the first book, or if you can, drop in anywhere in the series. Do you have a thought on that?
I don't think I'm the right person to. I mean, I think that I think you did benefit from reading them in order. But I don't know if it's necessary. It shouldn't be necessary. They should in a way stand alone. But I think the characters, because you get to learn more about the characters as you go along, probably it makes it a better experience if you have read some of the, at least some of the earlier ones.
Right.
Would you agree, Barbara? I don't know whether.
Well, you're only 4 books in, so it's not that burdensome. And I would say, yes, it's not as serious. When we were talking to the Child brothers about the new Jack Reacher, each one of those books is designed to be a standalone. There's no history with Reacher.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter which book you pick up. But I do think, A, you benefit from a better understanding of the character, but B, there's a certain amount of spoiling if you read a 4th book, and because something that might be a mystery in the first book has been resolved, and you can't help but learn that. So I think when there are not many books, it is better to read from the beginning. If this were your 12th or 14th or 15th, I probably would say just dive in.
Yeah.
So I mean, no, it really makes a difference. It's not that burdensome. Unfortunately, the earlier books are all in print. They're all in paperback. So, not a difficult thing to accomplish as a reader. Anyway.
I guess a good final question people are asking is there anything that you're reading right now that you're really enjoying and could recommend?
I just was I was up for an award this week called the Comedy Writers in Print. No, Comedy Writers in Print. No, Comedy Women in Print. That's what it was. Comedy Women in Print Award, which is quite a small thing, but it's very sweet that they're trying to push, funny women's writing. So I read lots of books that are not crime novels. Just for once, I was reading these.
It doesn't matter.
So there was the winner I really, really enjoyed, and it was called Dial A for Aunties. Have you heard of this book?
Well, it is sort of a crime novel. It's considered a cozy in this country by Jessie, what is her name?
Sutanto.
I believe she was. I didn't do the program. We did a program with her, but I think it was John that did it. And I believe she lives in Indonesia. And so
she does. She's in Jakarta. Yeah. I thought it was really funny. I mean, just made me laugh a lot. And so it was, slight annoyance not to win, but it was wonderful that it was her. I really thought that the book had huge, it was very, very funny. And it was, just held together fantastically well by the characters. It has these wonderful aunties who are very, very good characters. And it's very visual as well. And you can really, reading it, you think this is going to make a good movie, and you find at the end that it's been bought by Netflix to be made as a movie. It'll make it great as long as nobody messes it up. It should be great. It's very, very funny. So I really recommend that from what I was reading last week.
We did too. I think wasn't it our cozy mystery for something? I can't remember what. Anyway, it's called Dial A for Aunties. And Jessie Sutanto, I think her name is something that John Charles of our staff highly recommends. He absolutely loved it. So on that wonderful note, Lynn, it's been a real pleasure. I hope we don't have to let another year go by before we get together.
Well, I hope I'll see you again soon. I hope so.
I hope so too. Please keep us posted on what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'd really like to know. So let me start over again. Sorry, I can't talk. Thanks to all of you who have been watching our program here. There will be a podcast, and you can watch it on Facebook or YouTube indefinitely. So you can tell friends who might have enjoyed it and missed it that they still have an opportunity to see it. And Patrick is reminding us that we do have lovely signed book plates from Lynn, who, because she's in England, obviously, had trouble signing books for us and getting them here. So we're using book plates instead. But it's a lovely book. So, and a nice book for the holidays too, because, we all need a laugh during the stress of the holidays. So there it is, Psycho by the Sea. Right. Thank you so much, Lynn. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.